You know what's interesting? Everybody keeps talking about the obvious strengths of this team, but there's one conversation that could end up deciding how far the Bengals actually go this season. It's not the flashy headlines, and it's not something fans usually get excited about until it becomes a problem. The question is, are we overlooking the one area that could make or break this entire year? Because some new analysis just raised a few concerns that every Bengals fan should be paying attention to. Let's break it all down. Before we get into it, make sure to hit that like button if you're riding with the Bengals this season, and let me know you're part of Who Day Nation by dropping a Who Day in the comments. There is one question Bengals fans should be asking themselves before this season even begins, and it has nothing to do with Joe Burrow's talent, the wide receivers, or whether this offense can score points. The real question is much simpler, and honestly, much more uncomfortable. What if the biggest obstacle standing between Cincinnati and a deep playoff run is something we've already seen before? That possibility is becoming harder to ignore after multiple national evaluations reached almost the exact same conclusion about the Bengals' offensive line. Independent analysis from Sharp Football placed Cincinnati's offensive line near the bottom of the league, ranking it 28th entering the 2026 season. ESPN's Mike Clay was even more pessimistic, projecting the group at 31st. When different analysts, using different evaluation methods, arrive at nearly identical conclusions, it becomes impossible to simply dismiss the criticism. The concern isn't based on one individual player having a bad year. It's based on the Bengals making a very deliberate decision. Instead of dramatically rebuilding the offensive line, the organization has chosen continuity. The expectation is that essentially the same 5 starters from last season will return once again, with only rookie additions Brian Parker and Connor Lew providing new depth through the draft. That decision tells us something important. The front office clearly believes this group can improve simply by staying together. They aren't acting like a team that thinks the offensive line was broken beyond repair. Instead, they're betting that chemistry, experience, and another full off-season working as one unit can produce better results than another year ago. But here's where things become interesting. Sharp Football didn't simply criticize the rankings. They pointed directly toward production. According to their analysis, when Cincinnati's primary 5 offensive linemen were together on the field, Bengals running backs averaged just 4 yards before contact per rushing attempt, placing that combination near the bottom among qualified offensive line groups. That statistic perfectly illustrates why this conversation matters so much. It's not only about pass protection, it's about whether the offense can consistently create balance by establishing an efficient running game. The projected starting unit remains Orlando Brown Jr., second-year guard Dylan Fairchild, Ted Karras, Dalton Risner, and Amarius Mims at right tackle. Cincinnati also invested in Connor Lew as a possible center of the future, while adding Brian Parker and undrafted depth pieces, including Christian Jones, who reportedly received significant guaranteed money as an undrafted free agent. But beyond those moves, there were no major veteran free agent additions designed to completely reshape this unit. And that raises one of the biggest debates surrounding this football team. Should Bengals fans trust continuity more than outside evaluations? Because while national analysts continue placing this offensive line near the bottom of the NFL, Cincinnati's own decision-makers are sending the exact opposite message through their actions. Re-signing Dalton Risner wasn't accidental. Keeping the core together wasn't accidental. Every move suggests confidence inside the building that this group can become significantly better than what outsiders expect. There is also one factor working in Cincinnati's favor that statistics can't fully measure. For the first time, Joe Burrow is expected to play behind the same starting offensive line for consecutive seasons. That continuity matters. Offensive line play often depends on communication, trust, timing, and repetition. Those aren't things that develop overnight. The Bengals are betting that another full year together allows this unit to operate faster, cleaner, and more consistently than before. Still, the nightmare scenario is obvious. If these projections end up being accurate, the consequences could affect every part of the offense. The running game would struggle to generate efficiency. Protection would once again become a weekly concern. And, perhaps most importantly, keeping Joe Burrow healthy would become an even bigger challenge throughout the season. That's exactly why this discussion isn't just about rankings on paper. It's about whether Cincinnati has correctly identified continuity as the solution, or whether it underestimated a problem that could once again define the entire season. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe the national analysts are being too harsh on Cincinnati's offensive line? Or do you think this is the biggest concern heading into the 2026 season? Let me know your confidence level in the comments, from 1 to 10, and explain why. But the offensive line isn't the only situation that could completely change Cincinnati's season. There's another storyline quietly developing that deserves just as much attention, and it revolves around one of the most important decisions inside the organization. Who should be calling the plays if things don't go according to plan? Right now, Zac Taylor remains the Bengals' play caller, and based on everything we've heard, that's exactly how the organization wants it entering the 2026 season. Taylor himself explained that there is constant communication between him, offensive coordinator Dan Pitcher, and Joe Burrow throughout every series. According to Taylor, Pitcher is heavily involved in building the game plan and suggesting plays, but the calls ultimately come through Taylor before they reach Burrow. In other words, this offense is already very collaborative behind the scenes. That makes Dan Pitcher's growing reputation even more interesting. Around the league, he's becoming one of the NFL's rising offensive minds. He's already drawn interest from other organizations, interviewing for opportunities with both the Cleveland Browns and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Those interviews show that his work inside Cincinnati isn't going unnoticed. The Bengals clearly value his contributions, and Taylor has publicly praised the way Pitcher communicates expectations and helps shape an offense that has remained productive despite injuries and roster challenges. However, there's one warning that can't be ignored. If the Bengals were ever to reach a point during the season where Zac Taylor decided to hand over play-calling duties, it would likely signal that something had gone seriously wrong. History has shown that when head coaches who were hired because of their offensive play calling give up that responsibility in the middle of a season, it's often viewed as a panic move rather than a solution. That's why this isn't just a coaching discussion, it's a possible indicator of how the season is unfolding. The good news for Bengals fans is that none of these nightmare scenarios have happened. They're simply possibilities the team will need to avoid. If the offensive line improves through continuity and the coaching staff continues working together effectively, Cincinnati could prove every one of these outside projections wrong. Now it's your turn. Which concern worries you more heading into the season? The offensive line or the play-calling situation? Drop your opinion in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, so you never miss the latest Bengals news all season long. Go, Bengals!